Ready? All right, if you would turn to 1 Samuel chapter 20. We stopped at verse 24 last time because this is an extra long chapter. And so we'll pick up there and go through the rest of the chapter. David, if you remember, is running from Saul. Saul's still king. Jonathan, Saul's son and best friend of David, is helping him. He's relaying messages to David as his father makes new decrees threatening the life of David. Jonathan has been helping him and telling him when he needs to get out of town and all that, and David has done so. He's left his home, left his wife behind. Doesn't appear, at least we don't see anything yet, but doesn't appear as though David has any children yet. So it's just him and his wife, I guess. And maybe that's so because they haven't been, it doesn't seem like they've been married that long. So maybe they haven't had children yet, but so he doesn't have that to worry about, but just his wife. But anyway, he's on the run. And we'll see that throughout the next few chapters. Is it pretty much it? The title of this, again, of our series is Israel Wants a King. And I thought at first, in the beginning, I thought about stopping when we got to David, but Saul is still alive, and he's still king. And he's still the king that Israel requested of God, demanded of God, actually. They demanded a king, that God give them a king, and he gave them Saul. We've already seen and I think proven, I believe we've proven that Saul was not a saved man. Some will say, well, he was saved in the beginning and then the Lord removed his spirit from him. And we saw that where the Lord removed his spirit from him, but we never see where the Spirit indwelled Saul like he talks about in other places in the Scripture with other people. And the fact that the Lord sent an evil spirit to possess Saul at times. And so we know that a person who has been saved by the Lord cannot lose their salvation. That's ridiculous. And it's a heretical doctrine. If you want to get down to it, it's a blasphemous doctrine to say that God doesn't love us enough that he could keep us, or that we could remove ourselves, do something so bad that we could remove ourselves from the hand of God. That's impossible. So that's why I say I don't believe Saul was saved at all, not from the beginning, not ever. So tonight, let's start with verse 24, 1 Samuel 20, verse 24, and we'll read to the end of the chapter. So David hid himself in the field, and when the new moon was come, the king sat down to eat meat. Now, if you remember, David and Jonathan made a pact or a covenant, whatever you want to call it, a vow. David was to go into hiding, and there was 3 days where it was the new moon, and the custom was that Saul would call his closest confidants in, and it appears as though probably since David was family now, he's married to Saul's daughter, that he would call all those folks in for a big feast during the first 3 days after the new moon. And so that's happened, or is about to happen. The plan was, and David was concerned when he talked to Jonathan, he said, but your dad's the king is gonna know that I'm not there. I'm always there, sitting by him, and I'm not gonna be there. And he said, what do we do about that? And so Jonathan came up with a plan. He said, your family's having a sacrifice. They're a yearly sacrifice in Bethlehem. He said, you need to go be there with your family for that. He said, that'll be your excuse to not be with Saul. So that's what he does. And of course, David said, what do we tell Saul? What is that going to be enough to satisfy him? And they know it's not. Saul has turned very wickedly against David, even with David being as good as he's been to Saul. So in verse 24, he says, so David hid himself in the field, and when the new moon was come, the king set him down to eat meat, and the king sat upon his seat, as at other times, even upon a seat by the wall. And Jonathan arose, and Abner sat by Saul's side, and David's place was empty. So there's at least one empty chair there. Nevertheless, Saul spake not anything that day, for he thought, something hath befallen him. He is not clean. Surely he is not clean. So another part of this custom was to attend the event. You had to be clean. You had to have been cleansed. And so Saul thought, well, maybe he's been fighting a battle and maybe he's not clean. David was a warrior. Remember, he was over, or at least had been over some of Saul's troops. And it came to pass on the morrow, which was the second day of the month, that David's place was empty. And Saul said unto Jonathan his son, wherefore cometh not the son of Jesse to meat? Neither yesterday nor today. Notice he calls him the son of Jesse. Wouldn't you think that if he's his father-in-law, he would have called him the husband of my daughter, or my son-in-law, or something like that, something more affectionate than the son of Jesse? Well, that's more of how angry Saul is with David. And Jonathan answered Saul, David earnestly asked leave of me to go to Bethlehem. Now you think this is the first mistake, because Jonathan tells him David asked him for permission to leave. He didn't ask Saul. Saul's the king. Saul's the one who gives the commands to go or to stay. And he said, let me go, I pray thee, for my family have a sacrifice in the city, and my brother, he hath commanded me to be there. And now if I have found favor in thine eyes, let me get away, I pray thee, and see my brethren. Therefore he cometh not unto the king's table. So Jonathan lays it out to Saul. He said, this is why he's not there. He's got an excuse. He's got a valid excuse. You know, in their day and time, they took religious matters very seriously. And it was a yearly sacrifice. He needed to be there with his family. Then Saul's anger was kindled against Jonathan. And he said unto him, Thou son of the perverse, rebellious woman, do not I know that thou hast chosen the son of Jesse to thine own confusion, and unto the confusion of thy mother's nakedness? Well, pretty harsh words to his son, isn't it? He calls his mother a perverse, rebellious woman. Now, I don't remember, this is the first time I remember seeing anything about Jonathan's mother. Nothing ever mentioned about her before, was there? I think it did talk about him marrying, but we don't know any details about her other than what he puts here. It's almost as like Saul's accusing her of being a harlot. Verse 31, For as long as the son of Jesse liveth upon the ground, thou shalt not be established, nor thy kingdom. Wherefore now send and fetch him unto me, for he shall surely die. So as long as David's alive, Saul tells Jonathan, you'll never inherit the kingdom. You'll never be king as long as David's alive. It's a pretty serious accusation, pretty serious matter here. And he tells him, you go get him and bring him to me, and I want to kill him. And Jonathan answered Saul his father and said unto him, Wherefore shall he be slain? What hath he done? Legitimate questions. What's he done to you? You know, but what is he done? What is so bad? What has he done that was so bad that you want to kill him? What justifies killing the hero, the national hero of Israel? You know, remember David was more popular than Saul, at least for a time. And that's what's brought all this about. Saul is jealous. And Saul cast a javelin at him to smite him, tried to kill his own son. Whereby Jonathan knew that it was determined of his father to slay David. Saul tried to kill his own son because he asked a simple question. So, Jonathan knows for sure now what David was saying is true. His father is dead set, as we would say, on killing David. So Jonathan arose from the table in fierce anger, and did eat no meat the second day of the month. For he was grieved for David, because his father had done him shame. And again, Jonathan, by doing so, has offended his father. I mean, that's pretty obvious. With their customs of the day, if the king, especially if you were his family, and he has a feast like this, like it appears that you do this every month, at the first of the month with the new moon, and you skip out, you come but you don't eat, that's very offensive. That's the whole purpose of being there. And it came to pass in the morning that Jonathan went out into the field at the time appointed with David, and a little lad with him. Now remember, this was what we read earlier in this chapter last time. This is what they had agreed to do. So Jonathan was going to come, and he was going to fire some arrows in the air in this field, and depending on where they landed, that would tell David what he needed to do, if things were good or if things were bad back at the king's palace. And he said unto the lad, Run, find now the arrows which I shoot. And as the lad ran, he shot an arrow beyond him. And when the lad was come to place the arrow, to the place of the arrow which Jonathan had shot, Jonathan cried after the lad and said, Is not the arrow beyond thee? So he shot the arrow further than the lad was. And Jonathan cried after the lad, Make speed, haste, stay not. And Jonathan's lad gathered up the arrows and came to his master. But the lad knew not anything, only Jonathan and David knew the matter. So the lad didn't know anything about what was going on. Jonathan, his master, has shot some arrows into the air, and Jonathan has asked him where they landed, and he told him to go get them and bring them back. And that's all he knows. David and Jonathan are the only ones that know the pact that they've made. And Jonathan gave his artillery unto the lad, and said unto him, Go, carry them to the city. And as soon as the lad was gone, David arose out of a place toward the south, and fell on his face to the ground, and bowed himself 3 times. And they kissed one another, and wept one with another, until David exceeded. So Jonathan sends the lad back to town. David doesn't even know David's there. The lad doesn't. So David waits till the lad is gone, and then he comes out of hiding. And him and Jonathan, David knows by where the arrows fell what is going on. He knows things are bad back in Saul's kingdom, Saul's palace. And Jonathan said to David, Go in peace, for as much as we have sworn, both of us in the name of the Lord, saying, The Lord be between me and thee, and between my seed and thy seed forever. And he arose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city. So they've had a split, it appears. Jonathan knows as long as his dad's king, he can have nothing else to do with David. If he does, he's gonna be killed himself. That's how angry Saul is. And so David understands, and David keeps running. And if you go into the book of Psalms, I didn't look up exactly. There's a few chapters there that take place during David's running from Saul. And so David, even though he's on the run, remember there's people in the kingdom that think very highly of David. There are places he can go and stop, and people will take care of him in secret, and Saul will never know about it. That's how he survives. He knows who he can trust and who he can't. And also remember, David's not alone here. He's got a small group of men with him. His closest inner circle of men who are traveling with him. Now, next time when we get to chapter 21, David not only is on the run, but he winds up going to the Philistines, to the kingdom of Gath. Who was from Gath? Remember Goliath? The mighty warrior that David killed? Why would he go there? Well, that tells us one thing, that he felt just not as safe, I guess you could say, in Gath as he did with Saul. It's almost like he trusted the Philistines more than he trusted Saul. And when he goes to Gath, they're suspicious of him. They don't try to kill him. Now, if he had stayed much longer, they might have, but he is afraid of them and eventually leaves. But we see David on the run. And remember, we know the rest of the story. That's the good thing about this is we know the rest of the story. It's not like a novel that we've never read before and that this is our first time. We know the rest of the story. We know God's got plans for David. We know that David, we've already read where he's been anointed by Samuel as king. It's not time for him to take over as king yet. That's coming. But David is on the run from Saul, and he knows, it appears as though at times anyway, he knows that God's got plans for him, so he's trusting in the Lord. Sometimes I wonder, if we were in a similar situation, would we be that faithful? You know, a lot of his fighting with the army when he was in Saul's army, his stand against Goliath, now his running from Saul, and remember, it's the Lord that has instructed him to run. But he still trusts the Lord in all this. So we'll stop there for tonight. And